Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. Great to have you with us, Dave Revsine and Gerry DiNardo. We head into the home stretch here, and I would never want to deny you the opportunity to talk about the committee.
Well, the committee, this might be the easiest week they have, but we'll get into it. They certainly got the Big Ten right, and that's how I feel like it was something they couldn't get wrong.
So. Well, they could, right? Everyone has the potential to get things wrong, so let's give credit where it's due. You think they got the Big Ten right. This is, of course, our big story. It's going to remain our big story in many ways until the day after the Big Ten championship game. Let's get into it, and let's look at how those rankings compare to the AP. And at least at the top, the committee seems to have a higher opinion of the conference than those pollsters do. Michigan State, Ohio State, Michigan, all higher in the CFP than in the poll. Minnesota and Wisconsin, of course, unranked by the AP, but in the playoff rankings, while the opposite is true, interestingly enough, for Penn State. So let's start at the top. I find it interesting. You think the committee got it right for those Big Ten teams? In what way?
I do, but they could have switched Ohio State and Michigan State. I still would have said they got it right? Michigan had to be third. They lost to Michigan State. So now you're down to Ohio State and Michigan State. Put them, swap their positions. How do we know? It's too early in the season. They're all going to play one another. So you could have Ohio State 1, Michigan State 2. As long as you have Michigan 3, only because they lost to Michigan State, 1 and 2 doesn't really matter, and they're going to play one another.
Well, none of it matters, right? I mean, the true reality of what we're doing with this is it is just kind of an exercise in a television. It's giving us an opportunity to see what they're thinking. I mean, I do think I've always admired that transparency, that at least they tell us what they're thinking. However, they reserve the right, and in fact, they do say we tear it up every week and we start over again. So what they're thinking one week might not reflect what they're thinking another week. But beyond that, none of it matters until the final week, as we have learned year in and year out.
You do find out what the committee's thinking. That is no doubt. Like Cincinnati has no chance. All right. I mean, they do not.
They need a lot to happen.
They need a lot to happen. Yeah. So if the unpredictable happens, we already know that they said, yeah, they beat Notre Dame, and then that was it. You know. And again, let's go back to the core of the problem. How do they know? I mean, how does that group of people, those men and women, how do they know who's the best team in the country?
Are you asking me? I mean,
I'm asking you, yeah.
They watch the games.
And how do they know what they're watching?
Well, they've watched a lot of football, presumably.
When have they been trained?
Yeah.
How have they been trained? By who have they been trained? And if I'm a chancellor, my athletic director is not going to be on that committee and leave my campus whenever they have to leave and come back whenever they have to come back. And then when my athletic director does come back, he or she is going to be studying tape instead of being at one of my university's events or making a foundation call and trying to raise money. Remember, it's 3.5 hours per game for me.
Right, no, I
okay?
understand.
And
right.
I kind of know how to watch tape, okay? And then after a while, you know, especially when it's preseason, right, or non-conference, and we have 14 games. I mean, you can't watch 14 teams. And now we're playing each other, so me, Howard, and Joshua, you know, it's a little easier to catch up. But these people there's no way they have time to watch this. And there's no way they know what the heck they're watching.
Okay, so let me ask you this from the point of view of someone who obviously didn't play the game and didn't coach the game and doesn't know X's and O's, right? You could do the same thing with me. You could sit down and say, what are you watching? And I'd be like, well, you know, I have a way that I try to gauge who I think's good. Much of it is contingent on who ends up with more points. But
if I said to you, how's that 4-eye played?
Yeah, right. No doubt. And I would never pretend to know it, right? I mean, I've never tried to play that role. I've never tried to say I know more than I do. But what about metrics? I mean, do you just completely not believe in metrics? Because there are people running professional sports franchises incredibly successfully who do it solely based on metrics, who didn't play the game at a high level, but who say, I believe, based on everything that I've studied and everything that we know about how sports are played, that these are the most important measures of who's going to win and who's going to lose at the end and who the best team is. And so based on those metrics that are widely available and that the committee has at their disposal, I'm going to look at these metrics and I'm going to decide based on that, and then based on watching games in the way that I watch them, where I turn it on and I say, man, they can't block anyone, or wow, their secondary is really talented, without knowing any of the intricacies that you're talking about. Do you reject that as a way to understand sports?
No, I would hug that person and say, please sit next to me. I want the metrics, and I want him or her to know what I know, and I want to know what they know about metrics. No, I'm not saying that people on that committee don't have a different perspective that's very valuable. I mean, these are very successful people in their own field. But to have just Tyrone Willingham on there, who the only reason he's on, and thank God he said yes, is he was on one of the early committees and then his term ran out and then they had no coaches on it. If you look at the original committee, Tom Osborne, Barry Alvarez, I mean, these are Hall of Fame coaches. Condoleezza Rice, she great perspective. I don't know what it would be, but I'd love to have someone other than just the people watching tape. So I just want to add the tape watchers. I would have an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator, and a special teams coordinator. I'd have at least one expert in all those fields to say to the committee, this is the best defense in the country, this is the best offense in the country, and this is the best special teams. And then I'd have the metrics person get up and share what she or he knows. But not to have a really detailed knowledge of the game and you're trying to pick the best team. But
it almost sounds like the way that you're describing it. I understand what you are saying. Okay, but let's extrapolate it out. So you're saying it takes you 3.5 hours to watch a game, and we have 7 games in the Big Ten, and you're trying to evaluate all these different facets of these teams. So that's a 20-hour roughly proposition each week. And I know that all three of you take it really seriously. It's what makes you great at what you do. There are 25 teams that you're going to have to rank. And then, of course, you have to have some on the outside that you choose not to rank. So now we're talking about maybe 30 teams times 3.5 hours. I mean, there's not enough time in the day.
They divide it regionally, though. Not like Rick George has the Mountain West.
No, I understand. Okay, right. And then you report back with what you found. But even still, I mean, it's a daunting task. To do it in the way that you are describing it seems almost physically impossible.
Right. It's like paying Dabo Swinney $7 million a year. Yeah, I mean, at some point, you might have to hire some people.
What does Dabo have to do?
Because he spends a lot of time, too. I'm just saying, there has to be some financial reward. They're having trouble having people come on this committee because ADs talk to ADs, right? An AD that was on it 2 or 3 years ago says to another AD, I got behind in my work. My chancellor was on my butt. I didn't get home until Sunday. And then the next coach says, I was retired. I was playing golf before that. I mean, seriously. Now, if you want to bridge that gap, nobody's getting paid on that committee.
Okay,
except for Bill Hancock, who runs the committee.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you this then. As you look to overhaul this, and I think everyone wants for it to be overhauled, and all want for it to be overhauled, not because they don't think that the people on the committee are trying their best to do a great job. Yeah. I don't think there's anyone who would suggest that the people aren't doing their best with what you have said is a virtually impossible task, even if you are trained in doing this, evaluating tape and deciding who's good and who isn't. Is the solution simply to expand it and to just say, we've got these automatic qualifiers, and then at the margin, if let's say it's an 8-team playoff, if you're number 9 and you think you were better than number 8, you can scream from the mountaintop that you were wronged, but the solution is don't be number 9.
Yes, this committee could get the top 12 right. I totally lost faith in the committee when Ohio State won the Big Ten championship in Indianapolis. Georgia loses to Alabama, and Georgia's ranked 5th and Ohio State's ranked 6th. And Ohio State was really good that year. But yes, if you want to make a 12-team playoff, you can leave the committee the way it is, and everybody can make believe they know what they're watching.
It's fascinating stuff. It's challenging. I mean, I don't know what the solution is in the way you describe it, because you do have a personnel problem. You have a recruiting issue.
You have recruiting.
You have a very shallow recruiting pool. Joel Klatt is next. His take on the CFP rankings, plus what he learned about the Wolverines and Spartans after calling last week's game. Stick around for that. Back on Big Ten Today, we're going to hear a lot about quality wins going forward. Here are the best wins for the top 10 teams in the CFP rankings. Georgia and Alabama both with 2 top 20 wins, but none over the top 10. Michigan State, Oregon, Cincinnati, the three schools with victories over top 10 teams, with the Ducks and Bearcats both pulling them off on the road. We are joined now for our weekly conversation by Fox lead game analyst Joel Klatt. Joel, I want to get into some of the matchups this week, but the biggest story, obviously, is the college football playoff. I want to lead positive. I don't want to skew negative from the very beginning. So I want you to start with this. Tell me the things that stood out to you that you think the playoff committee got right.
The Georgia's the best team in the country.
Now, that was an easy one.
That's right. I think that they did a pretty decent job trying to honor head-to-head wins, like Oregon above Ohio State. I think that was probably a good takeaway. There were some things that were strange, obviously. And listen, I don't think that I'm frustrated anymore by these rankings. Rev, I got to tell you, I've come to the conclusion that I should not be upset anymore, because I will continue to be upset based on the fact that I'm expecting something that their structure and directive will not give me. So shame on me if I continue to expect something different from them when their directive, their structure, the entire playoff model, which I think is flawed, gives us kind of what we got last night in the rankings.
Okay, so to what degree? And we apparently have skewed into the Costanza airing of grievances here. Frank Costanza has taken over the discussion. But when you say their structure and model don't work for what you're looking for, expound on that.
Okay, so first of all, the playoff now means everything in our sport. So limiting it to only 4 participants is way too narrow. It's far too narrow. And because of that, we have to weigh what we think is more difficult, going through a Power 5 schedule in a conference that we think is great, or being undefeated in a conference that we don't think is great. So we're trying to shove too much into this pot that only holds 4 teams. So that's far too narrow. And it does another thing as well, is it strips the ability of programs around the country to define themselves as successful. Because the only meaning in our sport is now in the playoff. You can't define yourself as successful for being a bowl team or a division champion or winning your conference or going to a New Year's bowl game. All of that has been thrown into the air and sprinkled off, because it only matters if you're in the top 4. So that's the first part. But because of that, because we only have these 4 precious spots, we have to then make it subjective, because like what I said prior, we can't just include Cincinnati. I mean, they can't take one of the precious 4 spots when we know Alabama is better, just based on what we watch when we watch on Saturday or on film. So that doesn't, it's like a square peg in a round hole. That's one of my reasons why we need to expand. It's not because teams deserve a chance at a national championship as much as it is about the definition of success. And all the meaning in the sport being in these 4 spots, we need to offer that definition of success and meaning to more squads and more fan bases. So that's number 1. And then number 2, I think that the committee, this is just far too few people in a room talking. Can you imagine? One of the things that is actually good about the AP poll is that no one's talking to one another. They're not convincing each other of an opinion, right? So you're not getting the influence of one individual that far outweighs a whole section of the AP vote. They're all doing it individually, and therefore you're getting a data set that is much less flawed than what you get out of the 13-person committee who sit in the room and then convince themselves of something. So what you get from the committee is more on the edges of the bell curve and not in the fat part of the bell curve. For instance, there were only 16 voters, I believe, that voted as Alabama number 2 in the poll. That's about 20%. Well, that's on the edge of the bell curve. So we got an edge of the bell curve ranking from the committee, and we're told, well, that's the end-all, be-all. I would much rather sit in the fat part of the bell curve and equal out, or not equal out, but create more variables in the equation. We need to dilute the 13-person committee with either more people or more committees so that we can get to the fat part of the bell curve. Those are the things that are flawed with the playoff. So that's why I'm not going to get upset when they give us a ranking that, quite frankly, is the best that they can do with the current system.
You had a great seat for one of the all-time classic games in what has become a classic rivalry, Michigan State. And just the stakes for it were so high. The setting was fabulous. Everything about it just seemed perfect, except for, if you're a Michigan fan, the result. Right. Interested in your takeaways on both teams. Let's start with Michigan State. How good are the Spartans?
They're very good. And we asked Coach Tucker, before we left our meeting with him on Friday, what's the one thing, I always ask, what's the one thing you're sure about, you trust in your team? And he looked at me and he said, we will not quit, regardless of what happens. And that's exactly what played out. They just did not quit, and they kept pounding the rock, and they just continued to get after it. And then in the end, that ultimately paid off. They were able to overcome turnovers and still win. And then the other thing that I take away is Kenneth Walker is a Heisman Trophy running back. Not candidate, not go to New York. He, on the biggest stage, with the most people watching a college football game all year long, any network, put on an absolute show against Michigan. He was gone. If he got past the defensive line, he was gone. He was tremendous, Reb. Those are the things I learned about him. Tucker was exactly right. They will not quit. They're tough, they're salty, they're gritty, all of those things you want to throw at them. And that they've got a running back that probably, if you were to vote today, would win the Heisman Trophy.
It's interesting, and I've been throwing this one around. I know you love stuff like this. They had one run from a running back last year of 20 yards or longer. The entire season, one. He has 13 this year.
That's crazy.
All by himself.
And he's such a good fit for them, right? Like his vision plays into their scheme. Everything. He cuts well. I mean, what a marriage made in heaven. I credit him for finding this marriage, and then also for Mel Tucker and that staff for locating him out of Wake and putting him in a position to succeed.
So what do you make of Michigan here coming out of this? And again, look, they lost a rivalry game. We now know Jim Harbaugh's 3-4 against Michigan State. Everyone knows he hasn't beaten Ohio State yet, although that opportunity is still down there. I guess I would say, from where I sit, I know they didn't win the game, and I know you could construct a narrative that it's the same old deal, but I thought they played really well. I mean, it was just there were like 5 or 6 plays where if any of them go their way, they win the game. None of them went their way. And so they lost. But I look at what Ohio State did, and we'll talk about them in a second, against Penn State, and I look at how Michigan has played, and it's not unreasonable to me to think that Michigan could beat Ohio State and still end up were Michigan State to stumble in the Big Ten championship game.
Well, interesting. I actually have the exact opposite thought about their matchup with Ohio State. And I'm more worried for them now because Michigan State seemed to be one-dimensional and still dominated them late. Remember, Naylor wasn't in the game, Jalen Naylor.
Right.
And so they only had one receiver to throw to. Peyton Thorne did not have a great game. They couldn't protect the passer. All they could do was run the football, and he ran for almost 200 yards. So to me, that's a problem. So if you're having to face a Travion Henderson, like that's a problem. They did not adjust against tempo. They couldn't get on the field. They stopped throwing over the middle of the field, which is where Cade started having all of his success, in particular in the first half and then somewhere in the third quarter. And they started going outside of the numbers where he's not strong throwing the football. That was an adjustment I didn't love. 3rd and 3 with about 1:50 left. They're driving the football down. They throw a fade on 3rd and 3. First of all, if you complete it and score, you scored far too fast, way too fast, because everyone still had all their timeouts left. That's a time to run the ball. It's 4-down territory. You're the 5th-ranked rushing team in the country. Like that is a reverting to what they were in past years when they were too reliant on the pass and not enough on the run game. They got to this point as an undefeated top 10 team because of their unusual commitment to the run game, and yet they didn't commit to it in the biggest moment inside of 2 minutes. Those are things that I think are worrisome for the fan base, is that those were coaching errors, those adjustments that did not take place. Now, having said that, they did play fantastic. Andrell Anthony comes out. He establishes himself as maybe a star Rev on the outside as a wide receiver, and they did not get many breaks from the officials. That's a 4-point game, and they had a 4-point call on the strip sack that I still believe was a fumble that they recovered for a touchdown that was taken off the board. And I know you guys probably, I might be speaking out of turn here, but that was the wrong call. Mike Pereira agreed with me. All of us that looked at that was the wrong call. So replay took 4 points off the board from Michigan in a 4-point game. That's tough to swallow. They have to feel like they played well enough to win. And like you said, a couple of things here and there went the opposite way, and Michigan State beat them.
Okay, so now they do have Ohio State looming. Again, it's going to be a while until they get to the Buckeyes. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, I'm trying to spin it somewhat positively because I think they're way ahead of where they were a year ago. And I think that game seems far more reasonable.
I don't disagree.
And it seems far more reasonable given what happened with Ohio State. I mean, look, maybe we underestimated Penn State and maybe the absence or injury to Sean Clifford anyway against Illinois, maybe it impacted the defense as well. But Ohio State was slowed down considerably in the run game by a Penn State team that got 357 yards of rushing shoved down their throats by Illinois the week before. So what do we make of the Buckeyes now? I mean, if they come back down to earth, I know you've got them this week against Nebraska. Did that give you pause, what we saw against Penn State?
It did, because the one question in their 4-game win streak, if you want to call it that, or after CJ came back from that little shoulder injury, it was like, man, they look unbelievable. And you got the sense that maybe that they would even run Penn State out of the building after Penn State played so poorly against Illinois. But one thing I do know about Brent Pry, the defensive coordinator, and his ability to create confusion for Ohio State is that they always play them well defensively. Ryan Day, I've asked Ryan Day for a number of years, like, all right, who are the guys that give you the most trouble? Who are the best defensive coordinators in the league? And he always talks about Brent Pry first, and then he talks about Jim Leonhard. So I knew that would be a little bit of a problem for them, but I thought that they would play much better. I thought that their offensive line, I've watched it on tape, their offensive line played their worst game in over a month. They reverted back to a lot of missed assignments. There were too many free rushers, and I think that those are things that they can clean up. But it is worrisome a little bit, and we'll see what type of team shows up this week in Lincoln, because I think they've been a little bit hit or miss, and in particular on that offensive line.
Interested to see that one. It's the big noon Saturday game, Ohio State and Nebraska coming up over on Fox on Saturday. Joel Klatt on the call with Jenny Taft and Gus Johnson. Great stuff. Really appreciate it, Joel. We'll talk to you next week.
Always fun. I'll see you then.
More on the Buckeyes coming up. How's this for a big-time guest? C.J. Stroud on life in the spotlight, from an off-the-radar recruit to a college football superstar. Back on Big Ten today, and what a season has been for Ohio State redshirt freshman QB C.J. Stroud. First year as a starter, top 7 in the nation in all the categories you see here. Leads the Big Ten in passing yards per game. Last 4 weeks, 15 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions. C.J. Stroud is today's big interview. He joins us now from Columbus. And C.J., this is a team that leads the nation in total offense, leads the nation in scoring offense. What has made this attack so dangerous?
First of all, I just want to thank God. Without him, I wouldn't be here, so definitely have to thank him. But, I mean, I just feel like the way we prepare and the great coaches that we have really is a boost to our positive season, and we're really just now starting to click with each other, and then we're just having momentum. We're starting to roll.
You say you're just now starting to click. Was there a moment for you or a game for you where you felt like, wow, I got this, or it elevated somewhat for you?
No, I just feel like gradually as the season, I just got better and better. I never felt like we were playing too bad. I mean, of course, the season didn't start the way we wanted it to with that second game. But, I mean, in the game of football, nothing's perfect, so you just have to let that go and keep moving. I feel like that's what we did. My teammates, they helped me a lot. I leaned on my brothers, and, I mean, they helped me. So.
You did have a little bit of action last year. You redshirted, but you got into a few games. What did you learn from watching Justin Fields?
He taught me a lot. He taught me the speed of the game really doesn't change. It's just the mindset. I mean, you really have to be locked in every single play. You have to make good decisions. You have to handle the game well. You have to manage the game as a quarterback. But at the same time, go do you and make plays and just be confident. And I remember he texted me before the season started. He said, no matter how the season starts, just know that you'll finish strong. And you just have to get comfortable out there.
The season did start with some challenges for you. The day we were at camp, you were clearly having some shoulder issues. You took that Akron game off as well. What was bothering you with your shoulder in the preseason and early in the season here?
Yeah, I just was banged up. I mean, fall camp, I had stressed my rotator cuff, but the season injury was a whole different injury. It was in the Minnesota game. I got hit right on my shoulder and separated my AC joint. So that one wasn't fun. It was kind of painful. But, yeah, that was kind of like the struggles with that. But that week of rest really helped me just really gain back my confidence and my strength in my shoulders. So.
When you say you have a separated joint, is that something that eventually will need surgery, or does that just heal on its own?
Yeah, thank God it doesn't need surgery, and it'll heal on its own. So.
How does it feel now?
I feel almost back to 100%. I mean, Coach Mick, he does a good job in the weight room with me. He definitely helps me get it back stronger. And it's just one of those things that takes time, so I'm definitely feeling a lot better.
So take me back to that time, right? So you guys lost to Oregon. You're battling a shoulder injury. There's some rumblings that, hey, maybe this isn't the right guy. Maybe they ought to try one of these other guys and see if one of them is the answer. How did you kind of fight your way through both the physical issues and maybe some of the surrounding outside noise that might lead others to question themselves?
I just really stayed in my circle. I mean, if it wasn't God, my family, or my teammates or my coaches say anything, it really didn't bother me. Because at the end of the day, only we know what we go through every day. Only we know what the real feeling is of waking up and having to grind to get the win and then doing it again the next week. I mean, so when it came to that, I just really leaned on my brothers, leaned on my family, and then just prayed about it. And so that's how I kept my peace. I kept my joy. And I just kept going. And I mean, that's the thing about life is just perseverance. The more you can persevere through your problems, I feel like the better. So that's just really all I had to do was just lean on them.
In what ways did your teammates and your family help you? Was there something that somebody said that has stuck with you in any way?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, you can just, one of the main things that I always tell myself is to control the controllables. And the ones that you can't control is just let God handle it. So, I mean, I'm not going to wake up and look at my phone every day and just see all the negativity or the positivity, because at the end of the day, that stuff doesn't matter. I mean, I'm on this earth to praise God's name and inspire others. So, I mean, that's my job. And, of course, playing football with it. So, when it comes to that, I just have to stay focused with that and not worried about what anybody else has to say.
I mentioned the last 4 games, 15 touchdown passes, no interceptions. Where do you feel like your game has elevated?
I just feel like I'm more confident. I'm really finding my place in the Big Ten. I feel like we have a great momentum and we're just rolling. I feel like me and the coaches have built a trust, and they trust me in the game plan. I feel like they know that I'll make the right reads and not put the ball in harm's place. So when all those things are happening, then you have great linemen like we do. I think we have the best linemen in the country. We have some of the best running backs. We have great receivers, great tight ends. So when you put that all together, and then on top of that have a great defense, I mean, my job's kind of easy.
What makes Ryan Day such a great coach for a quarterback?
I feel that he played the position, so he kind of gets like what you're seeing and what you're going through with the reads and things like that. So I mean, I think he puts himself in your shoes, and he makes sure that you like with me. He'll come to me and ask me like, what plays you like this week, and usually I like all the plays because he doesn't really call bad plays. But I mean, he makes sure like that whatever you're running that you really like, because he knows that when he played the position he didn't like, when he ran plays that he didn't like. So that's like a big plus.
CJ, you mentioned a little bit about, hey, a couple of years ago, you're in high school, and to think of where you are now. People may not be aware of this, but you did not start until your junior year of high school. You got beat out as a sophomore. So what was it like knowing how good a player you were to sit and kind of bide your time, particularly when there were some hotshot quarterbacks in Southern California in your class who were already playing?
Yeah, it was definitely tough. It was a tough time for me. But I always kind of knew that something like this would happen. And at the time, I guess that was what God wanted to teach me and He wanted me to go through. And I mean, it taught me so much. It taught me how to be, to have perseverance and have some little wounds on me. Like, without that, I probably wouldn't even be here. So, of course, like seeing my buddies like Bryce and DJ like ball out and get a whole bunch of offers. I mean, it was nothing but joy to see that for me. And I knew that one day it would be my turn. So I just really had to stay down for the come up and just believe in myself, believe in my family, and then believe, of course, in God. So when all that was going on, I really was just trying to learn what God was teaching me, and so I can just elevate myself in the future.
And it did happen for you. You were a 3-star prospect, and then all of a sudden, your recruitment just took off. How did that happen?
I feel like when I went to the Elite 11 camp, a lot of people didn't know me at first, and even I didn't even know if I was going to do good or not, because, I mean, we had the best quarterbacks in the country there. And I just went with a mindset like I'm just going to have God with me and nothing can stop me. So when I got there, I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this. And then I just started rolling. I started believing in myself more. I started getting confident. And then, of course, I won it to the glory of God. And I feel like after that, I got a little buzz to my name. And then after that, I had a pretty good senior season. And I started getting more and more big-time offers, more and more big-time publicity. And I think I moved up in the rankings. But really, all in all, I really didn't pay attention to all the stars and stuff like that. To me, it really didn't matter. It was just trying to get better. Because I'm a student of the game. I love the game. So if I can watch film or see if I can correct something, I mean, that's the fun part to me, not like what comes with the game. It's the process of it.
Let's focus really quickly on the game coming up this weekend. You face a Nebraska team that is far better than its record. What is the biggest challenge that their defense presents?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail. Their record doesn't really prevail what they put on film. They do a lot of special things. I mean, a lot of things that we probably might be able to see, but if you don't, I mean, it could be a pain in the butt. So definitely have to take them like every other opponent. They're young. I mean, they're a veteran, fast team. They play fast. They know what kind of defense they run, and they execute it well. So, I mean, we just have to stay on our P's and Q's and really lock in and realize that every game is like March Madness, that if you win, you move on. If you lose, you go home. So we're really focused. We've never been more motivated before, so we're just going to keep the ball rolling.
CJ, really a pleasure to talk to you. Best of luck here going forward, and congratulations on what's been a great year to this point.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. God bless.
We are counting down to the semifinals of the Big Ten Women's Soccer Tourney here on the Big Ten Network. Start you off with the top seed Rutgers hosting Iowa. Then it's Purdue and Michigan. Coverage begins at 1:30 Eastern time right here on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Jackie Manny, former All-Big Ten player at Illinois, will be calling those games along with Dean Linke, and she joins us right now. And let's get into these games. Rutgers dominated the regular season. They get a Purdue team that has played really well, too. How much do you think all of that carries over here, Jackie? In other words, how much does regular season success carry over into tournament success?
You know, I think a ton. You obviously get your seed based off of how well you do in conference, but it also plays to the teams that kind of snuck into the tournament because it's that new slate, and those teams who maybe wouldn't have a chance at that final run, that NCAA run, are now able to maybe win a championship and then prolong their season longer than they thought.
Iowa comes in playing really well. They have never lost a Big Ten tourney semi, but how formidable is this challenge today? I mean, give people a sense for just how good this Rutgers team is. Rutgers
is unbelievable. I mean, they flew through this season with perfection, and they're so good down the spine. I mean, they've got Amir Ali up top. They've got Frankie Taliaferri, who transferred from Penn State. They've got Provenzano in the back. I mean, down their spine is so good, and it's going to be a really tough challenge for Iowa. But I think if they can stay compact, if they can force people out wide so that they can't really find the middle of the field for Rutgers, and then transition quickly. I think, this is a team that can also draw on last year. They had this huge run in the Big Ten championship last year. They won the championship. They went on to postseason play, did really well there too, and it's that same core group that's back. So I think if they can draw on that experience, draw on that kind of swagger and that confidence, then they're going to be able to find a little bit of success.
And to their credit, played Rutgers really well this year. I mean, lost 1-0.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about how high-powered this Rutgers team is, one of the best offensive teams in the country, to hold them to 1-0, be in the game the entire way, really says something. So what's the formula here for Iowa? How do they turn 1-0 into an upset win?
I think stay compact. I think keep things out wide, keep it away from players like Frankie Taliaferro and Amira Ali, who are that really good 1-2 punch. And then I think transfer quickly through players like Haley Ryberg, who's really good at going and turning, facing the game, getting forward. I think if they can stay compact, they can transition quickly. They're going to find a little bit of success.
Again, Rutgers averaging nearly 3 goals per game, 6th in the nation. So they are a challenging team for Iowa to slow down. I mentioned the other semi is Michigan and Purdue. Said how well Purdue has played this year. It's been really an incredible story when you think about it. A team that was very much off the radar that has had an incredible run here. They did play earlier this year. The Wolverines won when they played in West Lafayette. So what did you learn from that game that might carry forward to this semi today?
I think that they're 2 really good teams. They like to play soccer. They like to possess. They like to keep the ball knocking around. It'll be a really fun style of play to watch between these 2 teams, but that Purdue is hungry for this game. They wanted this game back as soon as they saw that loss on their calendar. And I think if they can find players like Sarah Griffith, they're going to be able to find a little bit of success and maybe find that revenge factor going forward.
And Michigan really dominated that game. I think a 20-6 advantage in shots. You mentioned Sarah Griffith, and we had her on the show earlier this year, and she's phenomenal, but also an amazing story. And if you missed that interview, she has had spinal fusion surgery, and yet here she is leading the Big Ten in goals. What makes her so tough to slow down?
You said spinal fusion. You would think that would hurt your mobility a little bit, but she actually is super mobile on and off the ball. I mean, the ball is glued to her foot when she's going at you off the dribble, and then off the ball, she's really smart with her movements, where she takes herself, finds different pockets of space. So she's going to be a handful just to be able to contain and know exactly where she's at. So I think, especially for Michigan's back line, just communication is going to be key, making sure that they know exactly where she is, a hands on her, and then not being afraid to be a little physical with her as well.
So she is the player to know for Purdue, clearly. For people who, again, maybe are just tuning in for the first time and haven't been watching Big Ten women's soccer this year, who are the players to know for Michigan?
I really like Aaliyah Martin in the back line. She's one of those players that can possess the ball out of the back. She sets play, which you don't really see in terms of a center back, but she's so good on the ball. She's so good at just finding the pace of the game and really setting the tone from the back, but she's also a really good defender. She's great in the air. She's got a ton of height on her. She's physical. She's great 1v1. So her in the back line is going to be big. And then Raleigh Loftman is a player who plays in the midfield, and she's one that can make those deep, dangerous runs that kind of catch you off guard. And she's been able to find the back of the net a ton this season. So I'm
going to put you on the spot a little bit. Give us a sense of how you see these games playing out.
I see Rutgers coming out on top. I just think they're confident. They're hard to dismantle right now. And then I think Michigan. I think, they've been able to kind of subtly fly under the radar. And the past 2 years, they've just kind of been knocked off when they didn't really expect it. And I think this year is their kind of coming out party. They're ready.
So aside from a Big Ten championship, well, I guess I need to ask you then, who do you see winning it? Does Michigan pull the upset and win it on Sunday, if that's the matchup?
I see Rutgers.
You see Rutgers winning?
I really do, yeah.
Okay, so aside from the Big Ten championship, which is clearly on the line and which is really meaningful for all these young women who are playing, there's also the notion of, do you move forward into the NCAA tournament? Mm-hmm. Give people the lay of the land here. And we were talking field hockey yesterday, and basically everyone who's playing in that tournament is probably going to make the NCAA tournament, maybe outside of one. How many teams of this group of 4 that are left from the Big Ten do you think are NCAA tournament teams?
I see 5. I think you could argue 6, maybe 7. Big Ten is just so tight. They're so good from top to bottom. There's no easy game in the Big Ten in terms of soccer, but I think we've got the top ones in terms of Rutgers and Michigan, Purdue, are your for sure ones. Penn State will get in. Maybe in Iowa will pull off something and be able to sneak in if they win a championship. And then you've got Wisconsin and Ohio State who are going to be battling, I think, for one of those last spots. So it's a competitive year, but it's a great year for women's soccer in Big Ten.
Really deep year once again. Jackie Manny, this was great. Look forward to hearing the call again. Jackie and Dean Linke coming up 1:30 Eastern time here on the Big Ten Network. There is PJ Fleck. Why is he smiling? Well, we will let you know. Next, Gerry on PJ's new contract and what it means for the Gophers going forward. Big Ten tailgate on campus this Saturday in Minnesota. Annie Sabo, Brock Vereen, Anthony Herron will be there. Gerry, Joshua Perry, Howard Griffith, and I will be here in studio getting you set for another big day in the conference. It's tailgate, all Big Ten, all morning long, presented by Land Rover, 10 a.m. Eastern time. And Gerry, I mentioned they'll be in Minneapolis. Minnesota announced a new 7-year contract for PJ Fleck. yesterday, so he is locked up long term. How important is it to end the speculation that maybe he would jump ship when you're rowing the boat?
Well, I think it's always important, especially obviously for recruiting. Now, just because he signed a contract doesn't mean he can't jump ship. But I think this. I remember when PJ interviewed, and I remember him telling the story. They were going to offer him the job, and he said, before he offered me the job, I'm different. You know, to row the boat and all those things that PJ has done to motivate his team and to build the most overused word in college football, culture, you know, it has worked. And I'm glad to see he's rewarded. And I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't stay there most of his career, if not all of it. I think he's very happy there. It seems that way. So congratulations to him and congratulations to Minnesota. It's been a good marriage so far.
It has indeed. What has stood out to you about the job he's done this year with this team?
Well, again, I go back to when Western Michigan was undefeated and they played Wisconsin in the Cotton Bowl. And I watched the Western Michigan tape to get ready for our bowl show. And they're just so well coached. I mean, you can see a well-coached team. And then one of the great things about what you and I do is we get to see practice. And I think we learn something new every year. This year, it was kind of not a walkthrough practice, but it was one of those down physical practice.
Special teams, mostly special teams. Yeah.
And he's got the bullhorn, right? And he's asking questions, and there's guys on the sidelines that better be paying attention because if Revsine's on the sideline, he might say, Revsine, what do we do? So he always says he's a grade school teacher. I think there's probably a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was kind of everyone had to be on their toes, and he was asking questions about, is this a live ball? What would have happened had it not been touched? What would have happened had it been blocked forward, right? He went through all these different, and again, typically we don't see a special teams practice. I know that everyone goes through those same things, but the way that he did it was unusual, and that's who he is, right? And he will be the first to tell you.
I was nervous he was going to ask me a question, to be honest with you. I had Kenny Burns right next to me, who played for me in Indiana, so I was going to say, Kenny, I need some help here.
I need some answers. How do you see this West race going forward? So Minnesota and Wisconsin control their own destinies. We know they meet the last week of the year, and so were they both to win out here going forward, it would come down to that game. But Iowa's still in the race. Purdue mathematically still has a shot. What do you think?
Yeah, you know, when you look at the schedules, I looked at the schedules. I think Wisconsin on paper, you know, first of all, they're improving. If you look at their schedule, what's left, I think Wisconsin has perhaps the easier schedule to negotiate. Not that it's an easy schedule. Obviously, Purdue has Michigan State and Ohio State. You know, and Minnesota lost to Ohio State. And I'll say it for the 100th time. You know, I think an undefeated divisional team should go to the championship.
Undefeated within the division.
Within their division.
If you beat everyone in your division and you lose all your crossovers, you should still go.
Because it neutralizes the crossovers.
I agree with you. No, I agree with you. I think the challenge there is that you want to put your best foot forward in terms of the college football playoff. And so if you are taking a team that is ranked lower, I agree with everything you're saying. Like, if you beat everyone in the West, you're the best team in the West. However, if you lose your 3 crossover games, and maybe you lost a non-conference game as well, and you just happen to beat everyone in the West, and someone else is sitting out there with 1 loss or 2 losses, from a competitive standpoint, from a conference, you're better off having that team there.
Right, and I'll go to one of the points Joel Klatt made in your interview. If you're not in the championship hunt with the 4 teams, you've had an unsuccessful season. So try telling that to a team that is undefeated in their division.
I know.
Someone who's not going to play professional football. This is going to be the ultimate of their athletic experience. Now, this has happened. It's happened at least twice in the SEC. I researched this. It happened to Steve Spurrier when he was at Florida, and it also happened to Steve Spurrier when he was at South Carolina. Now, the Florida thing was probably easier to take because they would have an opportunity. But you're an undefeated South Carolina team playing in the East Division of the SEC, and you don't go to the championship game. Let's try to explain that to these teams that we're talking about right now. I mean, the championship game is the best East and the best West. Well,
let's just say this. I hear what you're saying, but it won't happen to Minnesota this year.
Correct.
Right. I mean, if they beat everyone in the West, they're going.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I agree with you. I mean, again, I think this is the challenge that we face when everything is based around the playoff. And when everything is based around, and you talk about this a lot when you played at Notre Dame, that if you didn't win a national championship, you weren't successful.
Right, because we were an independent, right? So it was national championship or bust. we couldn't win a conference. But even the Rose Bowl now, if you go to the Rose Bowl and if you're one of these elite programs, it's like, so what? It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. It's fascinating.